Welcome back to our classroom. Hey, today we have Samuel Broaden and Kisa Marx. Yes, that's right, folks. Uh, Special guest, double the trouble, double the fun. Samuel is an early childhood advocate and author who believes in the power of childhood and showing children the power they have within themselves. So important for children to recognize the power they have within themselves. And he's worked in early education for about 20 years, from teacher to administration to quality coach, and now author and speaker. Kisa Marx, author, anti-racist curriculum developer, child advocate, champion for early educators, 2 decades in the field, so got the experience. Spent the past 15 years running self-affirming play and nature-focused family home child care in Oak Park, Illinois. Recently switched to a nonprofit model to offer high-quality child care because we know how expensive child care is to
Lord.
families who would otherwise be denied access. That is so essential. So thank you both for being here. Thank you folks for being here. Greatly appreciate it. Y'all have a book out that we gonna get into because you talking about some things. You talking about some things when it comes to weapon play and in the early childhood, and that's interesting because even as I look at my own children, I'm like, yo, like, is this just like in your nature or is it in our nature as a society? Right.
Let's talk about that.
Hey, I live in Florida. When I drive on the roads, I see they got billboards for the gun shows and whatnot. All right. So, it's a different vibe out here where we're at, but we know it's not just Florida. It's, across the country. There's a lot going on that relates to this particular topic, which I found it extremely interesting. And so I am curious to hear from you, to learn from you. And I know y'all got the book out too. And so let's first thank you for being here. I'm talking a lot, but I'm talking a lot because this topic of rethinking weapon play, it got my attention. So thank you both for being here.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you so much for having us. We're always excited to talk about this topic. So yeah, thanks so much.
Well, then let's talk about it.
Let's get into it.
Let's do it.
Listen, all right, I'm coming in hot.
Okay.
How does weapon play in early childhood serve as a tool for children to process complex emotions and social dynamics? Like, what's this stuff y'all talking about when it comes to rethinking weapon play? Because some people ain't gonna ride with you on this.
I mean, we already know that play is the best way that children learn. It's honestly, like, I feel like it's the best way that all of us learn, right? But so often as adults we kind of forget about play. But play is the way that children learn, and there's so many things that they're working through, that they're seeing, that they're hearing, that they don't really understand, and so they use play as a way to act things out, to get their feelings out, to really just navigate the world around them. And this idea of weapon play is no different, right? It's a type of play that we've all played when we were kids. It's a type of play that is just really, really natural, and so they're able to use that play to think about different dynamics in their own life, to think about different dynamics of how they fit into their community around them, how they communicate with each other. And so just like any other kind of play, it's really just how they make sense of the world and what they're seeing around them.
Yeah, and I'll piggyback off that, and I'll just say that, in our title, it's how to encourage imagination, kindness, and consent. And all of that happens through this play that's taboo, specifically in weapon play, because you learn consent, you learn what people like, what they don't like, you learn how to treat people, how to be kind to people, you learn how to kind of navigate the human experience, power dynamics, and all these bigger issues through just pretending your stick is a gun, just pretending that you have some bazookas. When children are processing the world around them through play, particularly in weapon play, they learn all of the things in that one aspect of play. So it's a powerful tool. No pun intended, I guess, because
Yeah.
so yeah, so it's very powerful tools and for children for learning.
Well, in the book, you say that the goal of this book is to help support you in thinking differently
Yeah.
and more deeply about the work you do,
Yeah.
right? So, and the reasons why you do and say things and what it all means. So, how has rethinking weapon play challenged your own beliefs and practices? Has
Yeah.
it made you see certain things differently that when you were younger, you were like, yeah, I never thought about it like that, or maybe I never thought about it at all?
Yeah, I think for me in particular, I think as educators, I think Samuel can attest to this as well. As educators, we do a lot of things because we've always done them. And as parents, we do a lot of things because we've always done it. So we don't, it's just mindless. We don't think about it. We don't put any reflection into the things we do and say, and the no's that are just come straight out the mouth, involuntarily. This has challenged everything within me. I grew up in a no gun household. We don't play guns, but I also grew up on the south side of Chicago with guns in the house. So it was like this very confusing combination. Like you couldn't say it, you couldn't talk about it, you couldn't play about it, but it was always there around you. There were drive-bys on my corner weekly, but nobody could talk about it around you. And so I just grew up with this immediate no to it. And then I let my children play. I have 3 male identifying children. Okay. I have 3 male identifying children, and it was a yes for them until Tamir Rice got killed, because they grew up in the same time. And then it was like immediate no, because I was fearful of them. So once I started to reflect on it and think about how powerful this type of play was and how necessary it was, it challenged and challenges everything within me.
Can we
Because
back up a moment, Kisa? Can we
yeah,
back
sure.
up?
Yep.
You had mentioned growing up in your household, it was a no in terms of, and what I'm understanding is that y'all couldn't talk about it,
We
or
couldn't
you
play it. We
couldn't
couldn't.
play it, whatever. Can
Mhm.
you explain why it was a no? Right. So it was
Yeah.
present in the house, but y'all
Hmm.
couldn't talk about it. You couldn't, do the imaginary play.
Yeah.
Explain why. Because
Sure.
I want to suspend assumptions here. I don't want to
Okay.
assume that the listener is just gonna fully understand like
Hmm.
that tension that existed there.
Yeah. Okay. So I grew up in the 80s and 90s on the south side of Chicago, in the middle of uh the crack war, the AIDS epidemic, the
All that.
gang violence, all the things, right? And so I have 2 older brothers, and gangs and guns, that was a means of survival, right? At that time for them. And my grandfather was from the South, and so he kept a rifle behind his chair in our room. But we could not play guns. We could not say gun. We could not do any of those things. So there was this extreme confusion about guns, because they were literally everywhere. We have a drop ceiling that you push up, and there were literally guns up there. And so they were under beds and in stashed in places, and like we were in belly or something. Like it was just everywhere, but we could not talk about it, and we couldn't even acknowledge the fact that they were there. And so, yeah, it was very, very confusing and hard to grow up not really knowing if there's something wrong with it, not knowing whether this is a safety thing, not knowing how to use it, and just being scared of what it was doing around to the people around us.
That's real. That's real. And you really showing the era you from, breaking out
Yeah.
the belly reference. Hey,
Yeah.
Samuel, I'm wondering, Samuel, how just listening to Kisa, how your experience was either similar or different to Kisa's.
Mhm.
Yeah, so I have a very different lived experience than Kisa, and um, in the same way that, growing up, that type of play wasn't something that adults encouraged us to do. It was never really something that I was specifically told not to do. When I grew up, I grew up in a kind of small, rural, mountainy kind of place, and so there was lots of kind of just independent play. Just we were out in the woods, we were out just by ourselves, and so it was never something that was encouraged, but it was never really something that was like explicitly told no. But when I got into education, the things that we're taught as we're learning to be educators, right, are those automatic no's without any sort of reflection. And so even 5 6 years ago, I was the teacher who said no to a lot of things. I was the teacher who said no guns at school. I was the teacher who said no to all those kinds of things. And it wasn't until a few years ago that I really was like, okay, I'm continuing to say the same thing over and over and over again, and the what I'm wanting isn't happening. So there's some sort of disconnect between me continually just saying no and the children continuing this play. And so I really just got to the point where I was like, I need to figure this out. And I tell the story in the book about just having the conversation with the children in the moment and being like, I need to try to understand what's going on, because I'm saying these things, it's not clicking. Like, we had a huge conversation about what this type of play meant to them, and that's really what opened my eyes to how much of our no is our own kind of perception of what the play is, and not what the children are thinking as they're doing it, right? Because I had the conversation with them and they were like, it's fun, it's this, we like doing. None of it was anything that was negative, none of it was anything that was violent, none of it was anything that had a bad intention. It was all just imaginative and fun. And so being able to just stop and kind of reflect and say, okay, I can't just keep saying no just
Mhm.
because that's what I've been doing, just because that's what I think I should be doing, because nothing is getting resolved, nothing is getting fixed, nothing is working here by me just saying that. And so being able to kind of just get to that point of that mindset of being like, okay, I need to rethink this, that's a journey in itself to get to that point. But being able to get there and just have that conversation and that eye-opening experience of like, wow, they're not thinking of this the same way that I'm thinking of it, really kind of switched that for me.
And then fun fact, then he married somebody who lived down the way from me.
That
So
yes,
Oh,
yes,
really?
yeah.
my husband grew up on the south side of Chicago as well, and so
Yeah.
him and Kisa have that connection. And so, going through this process of writing this book, hearing Kisa's lived experience, and then obviously knowing my husband's lived experience and talking with him through the things that I was writing, really kind of I was able to really round out like all these different lived experiences, and just even be able to recognize, my own privilege in talking about this topic that maybe I hadn't really touched on before.
So that I don't want to derail us, but that was a thread that we had to kind of pull together, like Perry and I, because the story, how we got here was through a story of a child in Samuel's classroom.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
Okay.
that
That's good
that
context.
child, yeah, that child happened to be Black, but he was the only Black child in an all-white classroom.
Oh,
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so Perry's perspective and my perspective were totally different when he was like, hey, I'm teacher of the year. Everybody gonna start playing weapon play. And we were
Mm-hmm.
like, wait. Well, I didn't even know at first, but Perry was
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
wait a minute.
Yeah.
How do you think that's
Yep.
gonna go down with his parents? And I was like, if I was to come in that classroom and see a bunch of white children chasing my Black child shooting at him,
come on.
there would be a different conversation. And so, yeah,
Wow.
so we were able to really, really reflect on that and how that looks from different angles. Perry as a
Wow.
Black
Wow.
man,
Wow.
me as a
Wow.
Black woman and mother of male children. And then
Mm-hmm.
Samuel with his experience and his background and wanting to be a reflective teacher and how that all works for our children. Yes.
Wow. Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. The context matters. You
Yeah,
know, and I'm like, oh,
context
wait a
matters.
second. Wait
Yeah,
a second.
like, yeah,
Yeah.
it was really dynamic that we
Yeah.
could get there. Like, wow. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Mhm.
Now I see where this book comes from. I mean, and that's critical, right? Because no matter how much people don't want to talk about race and they want to act like it's not real and
It always comes back to race.
we're just human beings and whatnot,
Yeah.
obviously.
Yeah.
Come on, folks. Like we live in a racialized society, so
Yeah.
you know, right. In a sense, it's unfortunate, right? It's unfortunate that we have to think about this, have these type of conversations,
Yeah.
and yet I'm grateful that y'all came to this realization that y'all were able to have the conversation, right? Able to come to the table, not like, oh, everybody got their defenses up or everybody's on attack mode, right?
Because we're not gonna get anywhere that way,
We
right?
ain't getting anywhere. But we
Mhm.
have to be able to acknowledge these real tensions, these
Mhm.
barriers, these
Mhm.
situations that
Mhm.
that are that or at least have a factor in the racial component,
Yeah.
uh,
And
and
the
that certainly,
dualities.
yeah, absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. And so,
Mhm.
thank you for sharing the story. Thank
Mhm.
you for having the courage to have the conversation, right?
Mhm.
To share the different perspectives, to work through it, and then to work together, right? To collaborate, to be
Mhm.
able to share your learnings.
Yeah. Mhm.
And that was really, this is actually a good segue into my next question, which is weapon play often triggers strong reactions from educators and parents alike.
Mhm.
What are some common misconceptions about weapon play, and how can educators address this in a culturally responsive and developmentally appropriate way?
Good, Sammy.
Yeah, I think, I mean, we kind of touched on a little bit this idea of like the way that children think about play and the way that we think about it. And so I think that's the biggest misconception, is that it's all about violence. It's all going to lead to violence. It's all of this, right? That's our own adult mind. That's our own adult experiences based on every thing that's going on in the world right now. Those are the thoughts that we have, and we bring that into the play. And so that's where we get that misconception, where if the children play this way, we're encouraging them to be violent, or we're encouraging them to be unkind and all of these things, when in reality, by allowing children to play this way, by encouraging them to play this way, we're able to teach them these super important skills that they're going to need to create a life in a world that is kinder and gentler and more empathetic than the one that we have now, because we're able to kind of break through that idea that children don't have the same thought process and the same um, thinking as we do when it comes to their play. They're not thinking about those things, right? Just like in that conversation I had, none of the children were saying like, I really like to be violent. I really like to be mean. I really like to do this, right? It was all about having fun. It was all about pretending. It was all about being strong and being powerful, and those dynamics, like Kisa was saying before. And so I think so often that's the misconception that I've come across so often, is that by allowing children to do this, we're creating more people who are going to be violent. We're creating more people who are going to be unkind, and all of these things that we don't want to see. um but we have to be able to recognize that our thoughts and our experiences and what we bring into it are not the same as what the children are thinking.
Yeah. Um, we come to the table in a classroom uh with societal norms. We come with our cultural norms. We come with our traumas and our lived experience. But children, even children who come from adverse home environments with trauma, all of it's emergent. It's brand new to them because they only been on the earth a little while. And so they just are not meeting us with the length and depth of lived experience that we have. It's we're putting that on them. And so we're seeing them as they try to hash out, what does power look like? What does control look like? You know, what does it mean to save people? What does it mean to endanger people? What does it mean to live in an environment where people are shooting or things like that? They're all just trying to piece that together. And we're putting serial killer, hitman, grooming them for violence. And we're actually putting the judgment on them. They're violent, they're doing these things. They're not doing any of that. And so I think the biggest challenge is knowing how to step back, or to ask, if somebody does challenge you, to ask, what is it that you're fearful of? And then be able to tell them what they're actually doing. Because what you think they're doing, that's not the way this works. That's not the way how any of this works. And so we have to know what they're actually doing in order to be able to educate other people. We all do have trauma. We all have experienced something. And living in the US, of course, we have a lot of trauma around weapons. But that doesn't mean that child who is using his pure is thinking the same thing. They just don't know what we know.
So we have to inquire about what it is they're playing, why it is they're playing that particular thing, what the interests are, and then we also have to remain curious and be open to the fact that we have to deal with the tapes that are playing in our own heads, right?
Yeah, and we have to honor that. Yeah, we have to honor that, but we can't put it on them.
Well,
that's sometimes is the hardest thing to do, right? Get to that point where we recognize that there's things that we need to do differently. We recognize that there's a way of thinking that we need to change, because again, like as educators, a lot of times our experience in education and what we're learning about to be educators is so much rooted in this adult control, or this adult idea of like, we know everything, we're the ones who know it, they need to listen. And so being able to get to the point where we're like, okay, maybe there's something I'm doing that needs to be corrected. Maybe there's something I'm thinking that needs to be thought about in a different way. That sometimes is the biggest struggle for educators, because we've been so conditioned in this idea of like, this is what we do, we know what we're doing, this is what it is. Children aren't capable, children don't know. All of that kind of background is what we're coming into it with. And so getting to that point, I think, is sometimes the most difficult thing.
Yeah, we have to do a lot of self-reflection in order to rewire the way we think and act.
I like that. Rewire it. Yes.
Yes.
And even as y'all are speaking, I'm feeling challenged in my own parenting.
Yeah.
In my own parenting and in my instruction with the groups that I lead, in my coaching with the kids that I coach. I'm feeling I really need to work on keeping this at the forefront of my mind. And I think,
can you tell us more? Is there like an experience that's sitting there?
I just think that sometimes I might be quick to shut something down instead of, really pose a series of questions and think about what's being said and like why they're doing this thing, whatever said thing is. As it relates to weapons, I have my 9-year-old daughter, my 6-year-old son, and my 3-year-old daughter. My son's the one I always have in mind when they're playing games that are weapon related, right? So I don't want to go to either extreme, right? I don't want to go to either extreme. I think there's a way that you can teach kids to not just play with weapons, whatever, to handle weapons. And I'm saying as they grow, to handle things responsibly, and yet, and yet, I have to wrestle with the realization that I'm raising a Black boy in this world, in this society, And we don't have to get all into all the stories and examples. Like there's too many, right?
Too many.
There's too many.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I have my own experience that plays in my head when I think about my son,
Mm-hmm.
and things that I want to try to help him hopefully either avoid or be better prepared for.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's things that I may not have experienced, but people around me have experienced. And
Yeah.
then there's things that have been experienced that people I don't know, but I see them and I'm like, looks like me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so all of those things, all of those things come to mind for me when I'm observing my son and how
Yeah.
he engages. Not that I'm not concerned about my daughters,
Mm-hmm. It's a
but
different type of concern, just like we talk about the duality. I get it.
yes,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
yes. And so I don't want to shut down his spirit of engaging in these games because it might be playing off of something he watched, like a superhero show or whatever, or some type of movie or show, or even a book, comic book or a book or whatever, like, and they might have had a weapon and they were using it for the good to protect the
Mm-hmm.
people, right?
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, I need to make sure I'm proactive and responsible in helping him navigate the society in which he's a target.
Yeah. So this is what I
Or I'm
say.
sorry. He's potentially a target.
Yeah, yeah. This is what I say, and I'm speaking from the heart as a mother of Black men now, but Black boys, when they were children. I get that. It's never gonna change. You always gonna feel that way. And as you should, because you live in this world, right? But what I challenge you to do is think about every other way your child plays. When he's Spider-Man, do you think he's gonna swing off of the building, climb outside, and go swinging outside off the roof?
He might.
Okay.
If I let him.
If you're cooking, if you're cooking with him, do you think he's gonna set the house on fire?
No, he
Do
ain't
you
gonna
stop
set
him
that.
from cooking? Do you stop him from playing Spider-Man? These
Sometimes
things could
like it
potentially
depends.
happen.
Yeah, if he's gonna
Yeah.
burn the food, I got I intervene.
Yeah,
But
these could potentially happen, but you're
yeah,
not going to stop them from
yeah,
that
right,
play,
right, right.
right? You're going to let them be Spider-Man. You're going to let them
Yeah,
be a pirate. You're going to let them cook the food. You're going to let them do all those things without that looming fear. Like, I have to teach them fire safety. I have to teach them don't go outside the window or, these things. Those are practical things, but
right.
there's a time and a place.
Yeah,
I'm
and
not going
I
to interrupt
wouldn't
that
for
play
me,
to
I
do it.
wouldn't say it's fear as opposed to like just trying to discern,
Yeah,
like, all right, is this the moment to go about it? How should I go about it if I go, like just
yeah,
and discerning like, all right, maybe it's not. Maybe it's just let me just fall back. Let me
yeah.
just fall back and let him be and let him play. Or like, am I reacting to something that's more a me issue?
Internal.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's our point of view is that
Mhm.
fall back first. Don't react. Think about where it's coming from. And of course, just like you would teach children, like stop, drop, and roll. And if there's a time and a place to talk about safety in your skin, talk about safety if your friend has a weapon in the house, all that, but it's not necessarily no, it's not at all in the midst of their play. That's a separate
Mhm.
conversation to have.
Well, earlier you referenced the importance, or the book subtitle includes incorporating kindness, consent, and empathy into weapon play. Can y'all share practical strategies or examples of how these values can be integrated into such play scenarios in the classroom? I think the educators and others would appreciate, maybe a couple examples that they could implement right away.
Yeah. For me, so much of it is just about the conversations that we're having with the children. And so, when if we're noticing this type of play and we're having conversations with them around it, and okay, you really you enjoy this type of play. How can we as a collective make this type of play safe? that's where those ideas are starting to come in, right? We're wanting to make sure that everybody that's participating in this play knows what it is before we start, and they're saying, yes, this is what we want to do. If we're playing in the midst of it and someone says, hey, I'm getting scared, I don't like this, whatever it is, we need to all recognize that it's also our jobs to advocate for that person, to say, hey, so and so said they don't want to play anymore. We got to make sure that we stop and get them where they want to be before we can continue. And, just having those conversations with them, and then just having those reminders as they're continuing to play, right? It's not this kind of one conversation that you're going to have and then you're going to be like, all right, cool, like they're good to go now, right? It's a conversation that continues. But what's really great about it is, in my experience, I had that conversation, we continue it, but then as time goes on, they're having those conversations between themselves. They're having those conversations together, absent of me. So I'm hearing them say things like, hey, we need to make sure we're doing this safe. How is this person feeling? And those are those ideas that we're wanting to teach them, that sometimes, at least for me, I felt like, how am I going to teach them about these big ideas that I want them to know? How to be empathetic, how to practice consent, how to advocate for each other. How am I going to be able to teach this to them? But then it's in their play and it's in our conversations. And so that's my biggest, like, tip, I guess I could say, is just have those conversations and be honest and just talk through things with the children.
So it sounds like educators and parents and others alike should have honest conversations with children, model the language that you want the children to utilize, and also help them to develop shared language, develop
Mm-hmm.
common language. Even some of the words you just were using, I think sometimes we think that, kids can't grasp the words or the concepts, but part of our duty is to expose them to the words and the
Yeah.
concepts
Yep.
and to
Yep.
plant those seeds, to help
Yeah.
them understand the word consent.
Yep.
To help them.
They're
There was
so
another
capable.
term that you use, and then, now it's escaping me, but you get the picture. To help
Yeah.
them, empathetic, right?
Oh,
To
yes.
help them understand the word empathy. What is empathy? What does it look like? What does it feel like? Here's an example of that. So
Yeah.
that's what
Mm-hmm.
I'm taking away from what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
And so mine as well is to model the behavior and give yourself grace. So
Say that. Say that.
as adults who have been taught to pretend like we know everything and we have the answer to everything, and that nothing bothers us, especially in early childhood. It's like, oh, everything's okay, it's okay, I don't care, I'm happy, I'm singing. But no, there are things that are upsetting to me, there are things that are scary to me. And so the way that I inched myself into being able to do it is just be realistic. Yes, I know those are your fingers pointed at me, but that's triggering for me in my brain. So I can say, I don't like it when you shoot at my face. That's scary to me. And so I can model that I have boundaries. There are things that are activating for me, even allowing the space. Don't shoot me in my face. You know what I mean? Like, I can say that to them and model, there are things I don't want you to do. And then that gives the children vocabulary, words to use when they have a boundary, and show them, when I don't want you to do that to me. I can play the game with you. You can chase me, but I can only go this far with you. And to know that just because we are reflective enough to make space for it doesn't mean that we aren't a work in progress. You come from where you come from, and you know what you know. And so if something is activating for you and it's too much, maybe you have a co-teacher and you can say, I need a minute. Or maybe you can talk to your partner or your good friend when you get a second to be like, ooh, that was a lot. I know it's good for the kids. I know it has nothing to do with me, but I felt all these things when it was happening. Just give yourself the grace to know that sometimes you got to do both. You got to hold space for them and hold space for yourself at the same time.
Yeah, and I think under the umbrella of what you're saying is that we need to be mindful of our own sensitivities.
Yeah.
That may be tied to some trauma and violence, or it may not be.
Yeah.
But we need to, I think often we're mindful of, not always, but we obviously should be mindful of the sensitivities of the children and their own backgrounds and stories that, may play into a situation in which, all right, this ain't working for this particular child. But
I love
sometimes,
that you said that.
Mhm.
I love that you said that because I Samuel, do you see it? I see it differently, that a lot of times we don't censor the child and their situation. So I love that you saw it that way.
yeah, I mean, I think I've been on both sides of it. I think, perhaps I've been on the side of like, oh, I thought I was centering the child. That was my intention, but that's
Mm-hmm.
not the thing I actually did.
Oh yeah.
Mhm.
So that,
Mhm.
so
Mhm.
that, so that unfortunately the impact was different. And,
Mhm.
and then I think I've been on the other side, and I think as I've gotten older, especially in the past couple years, and maybe it's now because I'm a parent of 3 kids. I'm starting to do better. I'm starting to recognize first and foremost, like the things that really impact me, the things that are, for lack of a better term, triggering to me.
Yeah. Mhm.
And like, oh snap, this is doing something to me. It's making me feel a particular way. Like,
Mhm.
let me acknowledge that, and then if when and if necessary, then let me communicate that.
Yeah.
Let me let y'all know. Hey,
Mhm. Yeah.
just so we're clear,
Mhm.
that behavior right there, that I want you to know how I'm receiving it.
Yeah.
Like,
Mhm.
y'all
Mhm.
might be having a blast.
Yeah.
I'm glad you're having
I'm not enjoying this.
I'm gonna have a blast outside.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'll be saying,
And that's a gift. That's a gift to give to children, to be able to communicate
Yes.
that with them.
Yes.
I'm a human being just like you.
Yeah.
yeah,
And it's
yeah.
it's
I used
it's
to feel
it's
guilty
these
about that.
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and it's these cycles that we're in, right? Where when we're younger, we're not encouraged to create boundaries, we're not encouraged to talk about our feelings, right? And so now that we're older, it's so hard for us to figure out how to make a boundary. It's all these cycles that we need to break and give something different to these kids, give them opportunities to learn about their own boundaries, encourage them to create boundaries, encourage them to create boundaries with you, right? And encouraging all these things so that we can break that cycle of of just allowing everything to happen to us and around us and not having
Mm,
a say in what we're doing and in
yeah.
what's happening to us and what people are doing to us and how people are treating us, because that's how it's been, right? We think, you know, how we were taught, where we weren't encouraged for those things. Our parents probably weren't encouraged to do those things, and it's back and back and back. And so it's time to just break that down and stop that and give these children something different and something better so that they can then become adults who aren't sitting here talking about, man, I don't know how to make a boundary, I don't know how to speak up for myself.
Mhm.
Yeah, and what's for me, when I started working several years ago, I was part of the founding team of Montessori School. I lived in Austin, Texas for a while. I was part of the founding team of Austin's first public Montessori school. And when I was in that environment, it was just such a shift from everything I had experienced. It
That's
was,
where
it was such a
I'm
shift.
like,
It was
look at this unicorn with this perspective. You came from Montessori school. That's why.
when I was there, I'm like, what? Wait, what we doing with these? We allowing these kids to do all of this for
Yeah.
real? Why?
It
Where
all makes sense now.
right? But what I'm getting at is it's even now, right? Because like I still got work to do. We all got work to
Y'all
do.
do. Hmm.
Mhm.
Uh, but being in that environment helped me to realize how ingrained the I don't have a better word. I don't have a better framing for it, but like how ingrained the traditional, like I approach you in this way, where it's like it's a one-way thing pretty much. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? Like
Yeah.
I'm the teacher or administrator,
Yep.
you're the student. I talk, you listen. I talk,
Yeah.
you listen.
The way it's always been done. We
Yeah,
just,
as opposed to
formulaic.
like, you know, I'm gonna welcome you into conversation. We're conversing, and it's going both ways, and there's
Yeah.
freedom to question
Yeah.
without
Heavy
being
on the
shut
both way.
down, and there's freedom to express ideas. Your
Yeah.
ideas are still not always going to be right, but guess
Mhm.
what? My ideas ain't always going to be right either.
Yeah.
And there's room for me to listen to you, even though you're younger. There's room for me to listen to you and consider that you might have a very good point that I missed, and we need to incorporate into whatever we're doing. But
Yeah.
really, the word boundary is the thing that boundaries is that's really ringing in my mind right now, because when I think about my experience prior to being in the Montessori environment, I don't really feel like that was a term that we were using. We were using rules and regulate. You know what I'm saying?
I
Like
was
those are
just about to say rules and
rules and
regulations.
regulations. That was it. I'm
Yeah.
not even necessarily saying rules and regulations that's bad. There's space for that, right? There's space for that. However, the whole notion of boundaries, for me, is extremely important because it communicates my needs, your needs, our collective needs,
Yeah.
right? It welcomes the opportunity for us to express instead of just to be told.
Yeah.
Yep.
Mhm.
And so I feel like when we're communicating that with the children, it's empowering. I found that to be
Yep.
empowering, because like I'm understanding your boundaries, and so I now it's not a guessing game for me.
Yeah.
You know, now it's more like, all right, I need to hold myself accountable to the boundaries that you just expressed.
Yeah.
You know,
Instead of
this
there's
is
nobody to check you. There's no
right.
checks and
Yep.
balances.
Now I
You're
might
the
need to be
dictator.
reminded. I might need
Mhm.
to be
You
reminded,
do.
and vice versa.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're definitely going to need to be reminded periodically. And
But
that's
because of
fine. But at least
experience,
we got
you
an
have a
understanding.
limited amount of experience, so of course that you remind it more. Yeah.
Yeah, but like we don't. I just don't even remember as a learner being given the opportunity to, because there was
Yeah,
never a
never time.
discussion. It was just
Oh
like, yo,
no,
these are the
no.
rules, and if you break the rules, these are the consequences.
So I just want to back it up just a little bit when you were talking about we need rules and regulations. I think everybody needs to have boundaries and they need to know that there are consequences of their actions, right? But the issue is that rules and regulations, there's this ambiguity in it. And it's really a euphemism for compliance and control. There's no rules and regulations. It's if you do not comply, I control you in this way. And so we really need to shift our thinking to be really explicit in what we mean. If I have boundaries, my boundaries can be rock solid. And in my expectation is that we behave this way in this manner, but it's not going to be coercive. I'm not controlling you. I'm not going to give you a consequence if you don't comply with everything that I say. It's just that I expect you to rise to the expectations of the environment. And that's it. And I think a lot of times with the ambiguity, people don't understand it. They just think I'm the adult, therefore I control what's going on. So I kind of shy away from the rules and regulations because there's this undertone of compliance and control always there with that.
Yeah, that's understandable. I think the and I think I understand what you're saying, and there's not a but here. It's more, I'm pausing because I want to be careful how I frame this. But what I'm getting at is that sometimes I see how people go to extremes, and then their extremes, because even if they're shifting language from rules and regulations to boundaries, there can still be ambiguity in your boundaries, and because
Oh,
there's
true. True. If
ambiguity,
you, yeah.
then like, because like there's still consequences, right? Even in Montessori, right? Or
Yeah.
name
Yeah.
the name
In
the
life,
name the
there's
setup,
consequences.
like,
Yeah.
you know, in the Montessori, what we would the term we would use would be like, natural consequences,
Mhm.
so like this behavior
Yeah.
can result in this. The natural consequence of X is Y.
Yeah.
Simply that we would articulate that. We were like,
Yeah.
hey, well, listen, I thank you for sharing. You explain what happened. All right. And, here's how we have to address that.
Yeah.
And you should understand that the natural consequence of your actions is this. Where I get a little bit apprehensive is when people start entering into these conversations, and they're so liberal with it that it ends up causing harm in the environment. There's
Because
harm to
there's no
children.
from one end of the spectrum to the other. Is that what
Yeah,
you're saying?
yeah.
Yeah.
Like an easy example would be like there's no real accountability. So, a kid might get, all right, whatever. Like let's not say it's imaginary weapon play. Let's say, you're playing, you're rough, now that
Any
leads to
type of
rough
risky
house, and
play.
you, all right, well, the kid got punched in the face and the kid's hurt, or if it wasn't, maybe they weren't playing. This was a deliberate action, you know. And again, I'm playing through scenarios that I've seen.
Yeah.
Here's a deliberate action. This kid's hurt, but in the spirit of how you've been handling things, there doesn't seem to be a real response to like a real harmful situation. And I'm not saying that's y'all's framing. I'm just saying like I can see how people can take a piece of this conversation and run it all the way to the other side.
What I'm hearing is that there's layers to this. And so what we need to focus on is that you have to be explicit about what you're saying and what it means. And the reason that I stay away from rules and regulation is because it's common to attach control and compliance
You're
to
right.
rules and regulation, whereas boundaries and consequences is kind of like a new word that we can be very, not new word, and to certain approaches it's not new at all, but new terminology where we can shift our mindset and we can be very explicit about what boundaries and consequences mean and not have this game where it's open to interpretation.
Yes. Key word explicit. Key word explicit. And I think part of it too is that oftentimes in educational settings, they're not having these conversations proactively.
Yeah.
There's so much that is reactive. You know what I'm saying, Samuel? They just, a situation happens, now y'all addressing it, but you've never really taken the time to have this type of conversation. So we're even giving space for like our individual biases to come into play in how we respond to this situation with the children.
Yeah, absolutely. This should be in your open house. You should talk in an early childhood setting. You should talk about weapon play, risky play. That should be in your orientation, so every parent is aware of it.
And for especially for the early childhood educators, we're gonna need this to be in their teacher preparation program.
Absolutely.
Y'all hearing this? Y'all hearing this?
Y'all go get it. Y'all go get this book.
Yes.
Get the book. Accompany it with this episode.
Think about it.
You know what I'm giving y'all the tools right here.
Yeah.
All right, y'all. We could go on forever. This already gonna be. I'm gonna have to break this thing up. But let's pivot. Let's pivot a little bit. Let's lighten up the mood a little bit.
Okay.
If you had to have lunch with anybody dead or alive, who would it be and why?
Oh gosh.
Who would it be, Sammy?
Let's see. Honestly, I think probably my person that I would like to have lunch or spend time with would be Lucille Ball. She's
That
like a huge icon and hero of mine, and just to be able to just be like in that space and have that energy, I think would be awesome. That's fine.
like Kisa, you showing the era you from. You showing your age right now. I love Lucy. I love Lucy. You know, Samuel, you got that off because that's the first
Yeah.
time. That's the first time I've had a guest mention Lucille Ball as the person.
Yes.
Yeah, that was
Yes.
not what I
I
thought you
wasn't
were
ready.
gonna say.
I wasn't ready. Respect. How about you,
Yes.
Kisa?
Bob Marley, hands down.
Oh, Bob Marley.
Like
Yeah.
That's the
everything
first two. That's
about
the
him.
first
Oh,
also.
really? Yeah.
Hey.
Everything about him shifted the way that I think. And so if
Wow.
I could have a meal and chop it up with anybody, it would be him.
Wow. Look at y'all
Yeah.
trailblazing on this platform over here with your selections. I like it. What's a message of encouragement that you want to offer our audience?
Just keep going. Just keep going. The work, a lot of the work that we do is hard. A lot of the work that we do comes with a lot of emotions. It's a really intimate form of work that we do, working with young children, their families, and it can be tough, but just keep going and know that the more that you're continuing to want to do better, the more that you're continuing to want to offer something different, that's the best thing that you could do for the children, even when it doesn't feel like it, even when it doesn't feel like you're doing something that's meaningful or that is going to create a shift or a change for these children. Just the fact that you are understanding that there's something that you want to do differently for these children is the most important thing. So just keep going.
Yeah.
That's right. How about you, Kisa?
Mine is always give yourself grace. This is healing work, and we cannot fully be healers if we are hurting. And so we have to take our time and take care of ourselves so that we can authentically take care of others, because hurt people heal people all the time, but we sitting there bleeding while we shielding everybody else. And so I will say for educators who do all the work of taking in all these lives and being gatekeepers of all these little people is remember that there's a little you that you carrying around every day, and take care of that person too.
That's good.
Yes.
That's good stuff. Thanks, folks.
You're welcome.
For those that want to learn more, they want to dig into the content, where can they find your book?
The book you could find really anywhere, anywhere that you buy books, you can get it from. So yeah, it's everywhere. It's on both of our pages. It's on everything that we talk about and do. So you can definitely literally search our names, search any keyword from the book, and
Now we
you're gonna
fancy.
find it.
Google us. No.
Rethinking Weapon Play in Early Childhood: How to Encourage Imagination, Kindness, and Consent in Your Classroom. Samuel Broaden and Kisa Marx. If folks want to follow you, they want to connect with you, where can they go?
You can find
Go ahead.
You can find me on I'm Still Learning 9 on Gmail, or the Play Lab Foundation on Gmail. I mean Gmail, IG. My brain's not working. I'm sorry.
Yeah, and honoring childhood is everything for me. So Instagram at honoring childhood, website honoring childhood, podcast honoring childhood. Search that and you'll find me.
There you have it, folks. Thank you very much for being here. Once again, if you're not familiar, then get familiar, especially if you're an early childhood educator. Rethinking Weapon Play in Early Childhood: How to Encourage Imagination, Kindness, and Consent in Your Classroom. Thank you for being here, and you're welcome to come back anytime.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.